When Specialist Thomas Brennan smuggled the kitten onto the transport plane, he thought he was saving a life. When federal agents showed up at his door 6 months later with arrest warrants, he realized he had committed an international crime: possession of an endangered species, illegal wildlife trafficking across borders, violation of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Penalties included up to 5 years in federal prison and $250,000 in fines, all because he rescued what he thought was a dying stray kitten in Kyrgyzstan. All because he could not leave it behind to freeze to death in the mountains. All because no one told him that some acts of compassion are also acts of crime. This is the story of a medic who saved a life and destroyed his own, and the impossible choice he faced when they told him what he had to do next. Subscribe right now, because this story will show you how fast good intentions can become felonies. Comment what city and country you are watching from. Hit that like button, because this is not just about one soldier and one animal. This is about what happens when rescue becomes trafficking and when love becomes evidence. This is the story of Thomas Brennan and the crime he never meant to commit. Manas Air Base, Kyrgyzstan, November 2018. The base sat in the mountains near Bishk, cold, remote, a transit hub for troops rotating through Afghanistan. Brennan was an Army medic, 24 years old, from Portland, Oregon. He had been deployed for 8 months, seen things that made sleep impossible, patched up soldiers who did not make it, carried guilt that had no cure. He was due to rotate home in 3 weeks. 3 weeks until he could stop pretending he was okay. November 7th, Brennan was walking back to his quarters after a 12-hour shift. The temperature was dropping fast, maybe 20 degrees, snow starting to fall. He heard crying, faint, coming from near the perimeter fence. He followed the sound, found a tiny kitten huddled against the fence. Gray fur, white markings, eyes barely open, shaking violently from cold. The kitten was maybe 3 weeks old, way too young to survive winter in the mountains. Brennan picked the kitten up. It was freezing, almost hypothermic. He tucked it inside his jacket, felt the tiny body shivering against his chest. He looked around. No mother cat, no siblings, just this one kitten alone in the snow. Brennan knew he should report it, let someone else handle it, but he also knew what would happen. They would ignore it. The kitten would freeze to death within hours. He made a decision. He brought the kitten to his quarters. He set up a box, lined it with towels, used a heating pad on low. The kitten was barely responsive. Brennan had medical training. He knew hypothermia. He knew this kitten was close to death. He warmed it slowly, carefully, gave it sugar water with a syringe, kept it close to his body. Heat. For 3 hours, he was not sure the kitten would survive. Then finally, the shaking stopped. The kitten opened its eyes, made a tiny sound. Brennan exhaled. The kitten was going to make it, but something felt off. The kitten looked strange. The face was flatter than normal cats. The ears were small, set low on the head. The fur was incredibly dense, thicker than any kitten Brennan had seen. He thought maybe it was just the breed. Maybe local cats looked different. He was not an expert. It was close enough to a regular kitten, close enough to save. He named the kitten Birch after the trees near his home in Oregon. Birch adapted fast. Within a week, he was active, playful, eating solid food. But he did not act like cats Brennan knew. Birch made strange vocalizations, not meows, low chirping sounds, almost like a bird. He refused to be held for long, only tolerated touch on his terms. And he was growing fast, way faster than normal. Within 2 weeks, Birch had doubled in size. Within a month, he was massive, easily 3 times what a kitten should be. Brennan started worrying, asked around carefully, showed pictures to people. Most said it looked like a weird cat. One person, a contractor who worked with wildlife, looked closely at a photo, said, "That is not a domestic cat. That looks like a Pallas cat. They are wild, native to Central Asia. You should not have that." Brennan felt his stomach drop, said, "What do you mean wild?" The contractor said, "Wild is an endangered species. Wild is protected by international law. Wild as in you could get in serious trouble for having it. Then the contractor walked away. Did not report it. But the warning was clear. Brennan researched Pallas cats that night. Everything he read made his blood run cold. Critically endangered. Protected under CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Taking one from the wild was illegal. Transporting one across borders was trafficking. Keeping one without permits was a federal crime. Maximum penalty 5 years. In prison. Fines up to $250,000. Brennan sat there staring at his screen, at photos of Pallas cats that looked exactly like Birch, realizing he had accidentally committed a crime that could destroy his life. He had 2 weeks until his flight home. 2 weeks to figure out what to do. He could leave Birch here, turn him over to local authorities, hope they released him properly. But Birch had been hand-raised. He did not know how to hunt, did not know how to avoid predators. Releasing him was likely a death sentence. Or Brennan could try to bring Birch home, get him proper care, eventually work with wildlife organizations to do the right thing. But that meant smuggling an endangered species. Across international borders, that meant compounding the crime. Brennan talked to no one, could not risk it. Every person he told was another witness, another person who could report him. He spent those 2 weeks agonizing, barely sleeping, watching Birch play, watching this wild animal who trusted him completely, this animal who would die if Brennan left him behind, this animal who could send Brennan to prison if he brought him home. There was no good choice, just 2 bad options, and time was running out. November 20th, departure day. Brennan made his decision. He sedated Birch lightly with medication from the medical supplies, just enough to keep him calm, not enough to be dangerous. He placed Birch in a small carrying case, covered it with clothes in his duffel bag, left air gaps, walked through pre-flight checks. His heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. Security scanned his bag, looked at the screen, waved him through. They did not see Birch, or they saw something and did not care. Either way, Brennan was through. The flight was 14 hours. Brennan checked on Birch every hour in the bathroom, gave him water, made sure he was breathing okay. Birch stayed quiet, stayed calm. When they landed at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington, Brennan went through customs, declared nothing. They did not search his bag. He walked out of the airport, drove home to Portland, brought Birch into his apartment, set him up in a room, and sat there shaking. He had done it. He had smuggled an endangered species across international borders. He was officially a wildlife trafficker, and no one knew, except him. Birch thrived in Portland, grew even faster. By December, he was enormous. His fur was incredibly thick, his face distinctly flat, his behavior wild and independent. Brennan kept him hidden, told no one, worked from home as much as possible. But he knew he could not keep this secret forever. Birch needed proper care, needed to be with his own species eventually, needed things Brennan could not provide. He started researching wildlife sanctuaries, organizations that handled situations like this. But every contact form asked how he acquired the animal. Every question was a trap. Every answer was a confession. January 2019. Brennan found an organization called Exotic Wildlife Rescue. They specialized in illegally kept animals. Their website said they worked with authorities to ensure no criminal charges if owners surrendered voluntarily. Brennan did not know if he could trust that, but he had no other options. He filled out their contact form, said he had a Pallas cat, said he got it overseas, did not say how, waited. 3 days later, he got a call from a woman named Dr. Sarah Voss. She said, "I got your message. I need to ask some direct questions. Where did you get this animal?" Brennan hesitated, then said, "Kyrgyzstan. I was deployed there. I found him as a kitten. Thought he was domestic. Did not realize until later what he was." Dr. Voss was quiet. Then she said, "You brought him back to the United States?" Brennan said, "Yes." Dr. Voss said, "Do you understand that is illegal?" Brennan said, "I do now." Dr. Voss said, "We need to see the animal. We need to verify species. Then we need to contact U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They handle sites violations. I cannot promise you will not face charges, but voluntary surrender is always better than getting caught. Brennan said. When? Dr. Voss said. Tomorrow. That night, Brennan barely slept. He sat with Birch, watched him prowl around the room, watched this wild animal who should be in the mountains of Central Asia, but was instead in a Portland apartment because of one decision Brennan made in the snow. He thought about prison, thought about his family, thought about his future, thought about whether saving one life was worth destroying another. He still did not have an answer. January 15th, Dr. Voss arrived with two federal agents from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Special Agent Marcus Hill and Special Agent Jennifer Ortega. They were professional, polite, but they were law enforcement. Brennan let them in, showed them to the room where Birch was. Dr. Voss examined Birch carefully, took photos, took measurements. After 20 minutes, she said, "This is definitely a Pallas cat, Otocolobus magno, critically endangered, native to Central Asia. This animal should not be in the United States without permits." Agent Hill said, "Mr. Brennan, we need to ask you some questions. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you. You have the right to an attorney." Brennan felt his world tilt. He was being read his rights. This was real. This was happening. He said, "I do not need an attorney. I will tell you everything." Agent Hill said, "Are you sure?" Brennan said, "Yes, I did this. I accept responsibility." For the next 2 hours, Brennan explained everything. Finding Birch in the snow, not knowing what he was, discovering the truth, making the choice to bring him home. The agents took notes, asked clarifying questions, did not judge, did not react, just documented. When Brennan finished, Agent Ortega said, "You understand this is a violation of the Endangered Species Act and CITES regulations." Brennan said, "Yes." Agent Hill said, "We are going to seize the animal. We are going to forward this case to the U.S. Attorney. They will decide whether to prosecute. You should get a lawyer." Brennan said, "What happens to Birch?" Dr. Voss said, "We will take him to our facility. We will care for him, eventually. We will work to repatriate him to his native range if possible." Brennan said, "Will I ever see him again?" Dr. Voss said, "Probably not." They put Birch in a transport carrier. Birch fought, hissed, made sounds Brennan had never heard. Sounds of fear and anger. Brennan wanted to comfort him, wanted to explain, but there was nothing to say. Dr. Voss carried the carrier out. The agents followed. Before leaving, Agent Hill turned, said, "For what it is worth, I believe you had good intentions. But good intentions do not negate violations of federal law. You will hear from us." Then they were gone. Brennan stood in his empty apartment, in the room that still smelled like Birch, and felt like he had lost everything. 3 weeks later, Brennan received a letter from the U.S. Attorney's office. He opened it with shaking hands. The letter said he was being charged with 1 count of illegal possession of endangered species and 1 count of illegal importation of protected wildlife. If convicted, he faced up to 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000. His arraignment was scheduled for March 5th. He was advised to obtain legal counsel immediately. Brennan hired a lawyer, public defender named Rachel Kim. She reviewed his case, said, "This is complicated. You clearly did not intend to commit a crime, but ignorance of the law is not a defense. The fact that you smuggled the animal across international borders makes this serious. The U.S. Attorney might push for prison time to set an example, or they might offer a plea deal. We need to show remorse, show cooperation, show that you are not a wildlife trafficker. You are a soldier who made a mistake." Brennan said, "What are my chances?" Kim said, "Honestly, 50-50. The months leading to trial were hell. Brennan could not eat, could not sleep, could not function. He lost his job. His friends distanced themselves. His family was supportive but scared. His father, a retired police officer, said, "How did you not know this was illegal?" Brennan said, "I knew it was probably wrong. I just did not know it was a federal crime." His father said, "That is not an excuse." Brennan said, "I know, but what was I supposed to do? Let him die?" His father said, "Yes." You were supposed to let nature take its course. Brennan said, I could not do that. His father said, and now look where you are. Brennan started having nightmares, dreams where he was in prison, dreams where Birch was dying in the snow and Brennan could not reach him, dreams where federal agents were arresting him. In front of everyone he knew, he started drinking too much, started isolating, started wondering if this was worth it, if saving Birch was worth destroying himself. April 2019, pre-trial hearing. Brennan sat in federal court. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Lang, outlined the charges, said, the defendant knowingly removed an endangered species from its habitat. He knowingly transported it across international borders without permits. He knowingly kept it in his residence for 2 months without reporting it. These are not accidents. These are willful violations. We are asking for 18 months in federal prison and a $50,000 fine. Brennan felt sick. 18 months. His life was over. His lawyer, Kim, argued, Your Honor, my client is a decorated Army medic. He served his country honorably. He found what he believed was a dying domestic kitten. He saved its life. When he discovered his mistake, he immediately contacted authorities and surrendered the animal. He cooperated fully. He has no prior criminal record. He is not a wildlife trafficker. He is a compassionate person who made an error in judgment. We ask for leniency. The judge listened, said, I will take this under advisement. Sentencing is scheduled for May 20th. Those weeks were the longest of Brennan's life. He could not stop thinking about Birch, wondering if he was okay, wondering if he hated Brennan for giving him up, wondering if any of this mattered. He contacted Dr. Voss, asked for an update. She said, Birch is healthy. He is adapting to our facility. We are working with wildlife officials in Kyrgyzstan to arrange repatriation. It will take time, but he will go home eventually. Brennan said, Can I see him? Dr. Voss said, I do not think that is a good idea. It will confuse him. He needs to detach from humans. Brennan said, I understand. Then he hung up and cried for the first time since this started. May 20th, sentencing day. Brennan wore his Army dress uniform. His lawyer said it might help show the judge who he was, what he represented. The courtroom was packed. Media, wildlife advocates. Some supported Brennan. Some wanted him punished. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The judge said, I have reviewed this case carefully. This is not a typical wildlife trafficking case. The defendant is not a criminal. He is a soldier who acted impulsively to save an animal he believed was dying. However, his actions violated serious laws designed to protect endangered species. Ignorance does not excuse breaking these laws. Therefore, I am sentencing the defendant to 1-year probation, 200 hours of community service with wildlife organizations, and a fine of $10,000, no prison time. Brennan exhaled, no prison. He had been spared, but the conviction stayed on his record. The fine would take years to pay. The probation meant restrictions, and the guilt remained. The judge continued, I also want to say this. What you did came from compassion, but compassion without knowledge is dangerous. If you had left that animal in Kyrgyzstan and contacted local wildlife authorities, it could have been rescued properly. Instead, you took matters into your own hands and created an international incident. Let this be a lesson. Not all rescues are right. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let professionals handle it. Court dismissed. Brennan left the courthouse. His lawyer said, You got incredibly lucky. Most people in your situation go to prison. Brennan said, I do not feel lucky. Kim said, You should. You have a second chance. Use it. Brennan nodded. But inside, he felt empty. He had avoided prison, but he had lost Birch, lost his career, lost his reputation, all because he saved a life. Brennan completed his community service at Exotic Wildlife Rescue, the same organization that took Birch. He worked with rescued animals, learned about wildlife law, learned about the damage well-meaning people cause. Dr. Voss supervised him. She said, You are not the first person to make this mistake. People see suffering animals and act without thinking. But endangered species are endangered for a reason. Human interference, even with good intentions, can harm populations. Brennan said, I just wanted to save him. Dr. Voss said, I know, but saving one individual at the cost of breaking laws that protect the entire species is not saving. It is selfishness disguised as compassion. Those words haunted Brennan. Was that what he did? Was his rescue just selfishness? He thought about it constantly. Thought about the line between helping and harming. Thought about whether he would make the same choice again. He still did not know the answer. August 2019. Dr. Voss called Brennan. Said, I thought you should know. Birch is being transported back to Kyrgyzstan next week. We worked with authorities there. He will be released in a protected reserve. He has been trained to hunt, to avoid humans. He has a good chance of survival, Brennan said. Can I see him before he goes? Dr. Voss hesitated. Said, he does not remember. He is detached from humans. Seeing you might confuse him. Brennan said, I understand. Just tell him I am sorry. Tell him I tried. Dr. Voss said, he is a wild animal. He does not understand apologies. But I think on some level, he knows you saved his life. That counts for something. Brennan never saw Birch again. Birch was flown to Kyrgyzstan, released in the mountains where he belonged, monitored for 3 months. All reports said he was thriving, hunting successfully, avoiding humans, acting like a wild Pallas cat should. The rescue was considered a success, except it was not a rescue. It was a crime that happened to have a happy ending. Brennan finished his probation in May 2020. His record stayed. The conviction meant he could not work in certain fields, could not own firearms, could not travel to certain countries. His life was permanently altered. He got a job at a veterinary clinic, low pay, long hours, but he was working with animals, trying to make amends in some small way. He started volunteering with wildlife education programs, teaching people about endangered species, about laws that protect them, about why you should never take animals from the wild, even if they seem abandoned. He told his story, not to excuse what he did, but to warn others, to show them how fast good intentions become crimes. In 2021, Brennan was contacted by a documentary filmmaker. They wanted to tell his story. He refused at first, did not want the attention, did not want to relive it. But the filmmaker said, your story can save animals. If people understand the consequences of taking wildlife, they will think twice. You made a mistake. Use it to educate. Brennan agreed. The documentary aired in 2022. It was called The Compassion Crime. It showed Brennan's story, showed Birch, showed the legal process, showed the damage that rescue without knowledge causes. The response was mixed. Some people called Brennan a hero, said he saved a life and was punished unfairly. Others called him a criminal, said he broke important laws and deserved worse. Brennan read all of it, understood both sides, still did not know which side was right. Now, in 2024, Brennan works at that same veterinary clinic. He is 30 years old, still paying off the fine, still living with the conviction, still thinking about Birch. He follows Pallas cat conservation efforts, donates when he can, advocates for wildlife protection laws, not because he agrees with how he was treated, but because he understands why those laws exist. Sometimes people recognize him from the documentary, ask if he regrets saving Birch. Brennan always gives the same answer. He says, I regret how I did it. I regret not knowing better. I regret the laws I broke. But I do not regret that Birch is alive. I do not regret that he is free in the mountains where he belongs. I just wish I had been smart enough to do it the right way. Birch is still alive, now 6 years old, tracked occasionally by researchers in Kyrgyzstan, healthy, thriving, living the life he was meant to live. He has no memory of Brennan, no memory of being saved, no memory of Portland or the months in that apartment. He is fully wild now, fully himself, and that is how it should be. Brennan thinks about him anyway, wonders if saving Birch was worth the cost, worth the conviction, worth the destroyed career, worth the years of guilt. He has asked himself that question 1,000 times. The answer changes depending on the day. On good days, he thinks yes, Birch is alive. that matters. On bad days, he thinks no. He broke laws meant to protect animals like Birch. He became part of the problem he tried to solve. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Brennan saved one life, but he also showed how easy it is to become a criminal while trying to do good. How thin the line is between rescue and trafficking. How compassion without education is dangerous. His story is not a hero story. It is not a villain story. It is a cautionary tale. A reminder that good intentions are not enough. That wanting to help is not the same as knowing how to help. That sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let the system work, even when every instinct tells you to act. Was Brennan wrong to save Birch? Was he right to break the law? Should he have left Birch in the snow? Should he have contacted authorities instead of smuggling? These questions do not have easy answers. Laws exist for reasons, but so does compassion. Brennan exists in the space between those two truths. A medic who saved a life, a criminal who broke the law. Both things true, both things real, both things defining who he became. You tell me which one matters more.